Well, good morning and welcome to Fox 29 News Now. Here's a live look over Old City, Philadelphia, right above our station here on this Wednesday morning, December the 19th. I'm going to start you off in Upper Darby. A family is in the hospital this morning after an overnight fire. 2 jumped out of the window to safety, while 3 others were rescued by fire crews. Lauren Johnson was live at the scene.
Hey there, guys. So it looks like the restoration crews are pretty much finished up with their work to secure the home, or at least what's left of this home. And we spoke to the next door neighbor, Fitzgerald Brown. He says he's been living here for about 15 years, as has the family who lived in this home. He was first alerted by the fire when his wife came running downstairs saying she heard glass shattering. That noise was a woman breaking and jumping from a second floor window. The deputy fire chief confirmed that to us earlier this morning. He said 2 people had to jump from the burning home. Firefighters then threw up ladders, went into the home, pulled 2 other adults from the second story. One person was trapped on that first floor where the firefighters say the fire appeared to start. That's where they noticed it when they first arrived here around 1 a.m. this morning. It was out shortly after that. Here is that neighbor.
I seen a girlfriend, the person who jumped from upstairs landed right here. And I'm assuming her boyfriend must have jumped too, because that's when my wife said she heard the glass initially. There was more smoke than anything. And they, like I said, the firemen went upstairs because the daughter was panicking because she knew her mother was still inside.
It's Christmas here, and we have a full five families sitting in the hospital that probably won't be home for Christmas possibly. So my prayers go out to them. I'm sure the community will be really coming together and making sure their prayers for the families and whatever their needs are, we're here for them.
As for those victims, we understand they were all adults, and the neighbor confirms that same information to us. All 5 victims were transported to area hospitals with very serious injuries, and one woman was later taken to Temple University Hospital. What awful timing this all happened. The father apparently had just hung up the Christmas lights for the family yesterday. There was a tree on the front porch. Fire officials telling us that tree did not have any lights on it, so they do not think that's how the fire started. We also understand that the man of the house here also owns a restaurant at the end of this street.
Thank you, Lauren, for that update. Well, is there a deal in the works now to prevent a possible partial government shutdown this week? Doug Luzader spoke with Fox 29 Good Day with some of the details.
And it could move forward later this week. We're running out of days here on a temporary deal to avoid this government shutdown or partial shutdown.
And Doug, we mentioned this earlier in the week that we thought that it's more likely that they're going to come up with a temporary thing than actually solving this.
That's kind of how this is shaking out. I mean, we'll see. There's still a lot of things that have to happen for this thing to stay on the rails. But right now, there seems to be some sentiment that the government should not go through a partial shutdown this week. The question is whether there's enough time to stop it from happening. Could some kind of a deal be brewing this morning in the corridors of Capitol Hill?
Do you see how that can happen?
There's always a Christmas miracle, is that what Mitch calls it? There's always a way for it to happen.
A way for Congress to keep the money taps open and flowing around here. They could be edging closer to a short-term deal, what's called a continuing resolution, or CR.
Look, if Leader McConnell puts a short-term CR on the table, it's something we'd very seriously consider.
Yeah. See what happens.
Well, you say that, but what about...
Too early to say, sorry.
But as the days fly by approaching that Friday deadline, what about the president's border wall? The White House now saying maybe a specific $5 billion appropriation for a wall isn't necessary.
We're looking at other areas where we can draw money from to make sure that the president can actually protect our border and protect American citizens.
Democrats will fight that, but some are willing to spend money on a fence, not a wall.
If they can just avoid using the W word, he might get some Democrats to support a 30-foot double fence, which is the equivalent
But isn't
of a
this
wall.
kind of ridiculous, the semantics?
Well, maybe it is, but look at this tweet from the president. We are not building a concrete wall. We are building artistically designed steel slats so that you can easily see through it. It will be beautiful. Right, the short-term deal that they're talking about would go through February 8th. So, yes, it would kind of bridge this gap over Christmas, but it also means we'd be talking about another potential government shutdown probably early next year.
We'll be right back to where we were.
Yep.
Well, as long as it's artistic. Slats in it, were they big enough you could get through them?
Presumably not.
Yeah, that's kind of the point.
Defeat the purpose, but you never know.
Yeah, as long as it's not concrete.
Well, the Senate faces a Friday deadline at midnight to reach an agreement on federal funding to avoid a government shutdown. I'm going to take you live over to the Senate floor. This is happening right now. The debate is going on.
For whom this issue is a years-long passion. When Senator Durbin gets his teeth into an issue, he doesn't let go till he achieves it. And he's great at getting it done. It's a real victory for him. Senator Booker, who really felt this issue so passionately from his residence in Newark and seeing what has happened to friends of his, people he's known. And he was really a brilliant legislative tactician, knowing just how far to push, getting the most he could in a Congress that was not from our side of the aisle. Senator Whitehouse, who carried the mantle of making sure that while people are in prison, they're given adequate preparation so when they come out, they don't become recidivists again. Free from drugs, with job training, so they can become useful and productive members of society. And Senator Harris, who added her passion and experience as Attorney General to the great arguments for this bill. And I don't want to leave out colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Senator Grassley played a real role as a statesman. Senator Lee did tremendous work on this bill. And again, like Senator Booker, from an opposite point of view, knew when to hold and knew when to fold. So I thank all of them, because this bill will make an extraordinary difference in countless lives by making our sentencing laws fairer and smarter, by giving judges more discretion so low-level, nonviolent drug offenses aren't always subject to arbitrary mandatory minimums, by giving prisoners with good behavior who work hard to rehabilitate themselves better opportunities to prepare for integration back into society as productive citizens who can contribute to their communities, and by ending the most abusive practices of our criminal justice system, like juvenile solitary confinement and shackling of pregnant prisoners. The bill got 87 votes. Those 87 votes are an entreaty to the new Congress to do more. It's called First Step for a lot of reasons, but one of which is many of us have felt we have to go further and do more. Next year, hopefully we can. And the resounding support from both sides of the aisle that this bill got should help us, should importune us to not just let this be the last proposal, but the first on this area. The law will bring more justice to our justice system, I was proud to vote for it and so grateful for the work of my colleagues who pulled a diverse coalition together to get it across the line. On China, negotiations are ongoing between the Trump administration and Chinese officials about a potential détente in our trading relationship. Of import to the Chinese is the recent arrest of Huawei CFO on charges of violating U.S. sanctions law, which is only one area of concern when it comes to Huawei's technology. Let me be very clear. The United States should not make any concessions until and unless China makes credible and enforceable commitments to end all forms of theft and extortion of American intellectual property. As Ambassador Lighthizer recently pointed out, and I cannot commend him enough for the good job he's doing, during the Obama administration alone, China made no less than 10 independent claims or commitments to get rid of forced technology transfers and cyber theft policies. As we know, China's cyber espionage continues unabated. Just last week, it was confirmed that China was behind the data breach of Marriott hotels. And we know that they continue to require any company to sell things, and so many companies that sell things in China, to transfer their technology. If we continue on this path that we have for the last 10 or 15 years, we will no longer be the leading economy in the world. All the great ideas that Americans have because of our free and open and entrepreneurial system will be stolen, purloined, and China will dominate. We're there for fair competition. China doesn't compete fairly. And I have to say, neither the Bush nor Obama administration stood up strongly to China. This administration shows signs of doing it. My message to President Trump, don't back off. Follow Mr. Lighthizer, not those in your administration, as reported, Senator Mr. Mnuchin and others, Mr. Ross, who want to settle for next to nothing. That would be a disgrace. President Trump has tried the conciliatory approach. He let ZTE off the hook in hopes of gaining concessions from China on North Korea and got none. North Korea continues to expand its nuclear capabilities. So, Mr. President, do not make the same mistake again by interfering in the case of Huawei's CFO. And, Mr. President, do not capitulate on U.S. trade policy without meaningful, ironclad commitments from China to end its predatory trade practices, its theft of our intellectual property, and until China allows U.S. companies to compete freely in its markets without technology transfer or other coercions. To do so otherwise would put the future of this great nation at great risk. Now, finally, Mr. President, I've come here to speak about a dear friend and a wonderful colleague, the senior senator from Florida, Bill Nelson. A Floridian born and bred, Bill Nelson didn't grow up with a silver spoon in his mouth. Everything he's achieved in life, he achieved because he worked for it. Hard work is one of his credos. In high school, Bill raised cattle in his spare time. Not every teenager's idea of a good time, and something we never did in Brooklyn. But it led to a lifetime association with Florida's 4-H program, which continues to support Florida's agricultural community today. And just as important, Bill's extracurricular animal husbandry allowed him to save up the $10,000 he needed to attend college at the University of Florida. Public service, even then, was never far from this generous man's thoughts. He gave his first political speech as a candidate for junior high school president, a race he won. In college, he interned for Florida Senator George Smathers, whose son Bruce happened to be his roommate. But that internship turned out to be the lesser contribution of Bill's friendships with Bruce, because a few years after law school, Bruce would introduce Bill to Grace Cavert, who became Grace Nelson, the love of Bill's life. For those of us who know Bill, we know he loves Grace more than anything in the world. And they are truly a dream team. Just to watch them together, caring about each other so, brings joy to anyone's heart, certainly mine. Many of my colleagues, of course, know Grace as well and have worked closely with her. Not the least reason being that she's the authority in that household today. With Grace by his side, Senator Nelson embarked on what would be a distinguished career of public service in Florida as congressman, tax commissioner, and eventually senator. Of course, along the way, Senator Nelson would also earn the title of payload specialist aboard the space shuttle Columbia. As most folks know, then Congressman Nelson, who was chair of the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee, participated in a week-long space flight on the Columbia. What most folks don't know, however, was that the launch for the mission was aborted not once, not twice, but 3 times. Eventually, though, the liftoff was achieved, and Bill became only the second sitting member of Congress to leave Earth's atmosphere, where, in his words, he saw, quote, the blue brilliance of the Earth from the edge of the heavens. There's a name given to the shift in perspective experienced by astronauts called the overview effect, seeing the Earth from the window of a space shuttle.
And I do just want to switch over to some senators talking about the First Step Act. This is live.
And also
satisfy so many members that we eventually did satisfy, as you can see by an 87-12 vote, because about 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago in the Republican caucus, we had to listen to a lot of people that had questions about the bill, probably because at that point they hadn't read the legislation. But one by one, we were able to pick up co-sponsors from 12 to 36, I believe, 18 Republicans, 18 Democrats. We were gradually able to overcome the main obstacle to the bill, which was the reluctance of the leader to bring it up. But we accomplished that goal by more than meeting his expectations, that it would take at least 60 votes for his even to consider bringing it up. And we could show that we had many more votes than that. And then finally, I'll just sum it up this way. When you can get an overwhelming majority of the United States Senate, when you can pre-conference with the House, and we visited with the House leaders on this point 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they feel that they can yet this year do this through their short-term process of getting a bill through by a 2/3 margin, and then having the president on board so he will sign it. Plus, also, you don't want to forget the broad support we had from outside interest groups, all the way from people that you'd consider very liberal, and I don't know whether the ACLU considers themselves very liberal, but at least they're on that end of the spectrum. And then over here you've got people like the American Conservative Union and everything in between. These people that are up here with me help bring that together. So all I can say to Senator Durbin and Senator Lee, thank you for awakening me to the necessity of this legislation and having me study the problems that you were pioneers in bringing forth. And then to Senator Booker and Senator Tim Scott, thank you for joining us as well and making this a success that it is. So, Senator Durbin, why don't you proceed?
Chuck Grassley, thanks a lot. It's an honor to be here today and to recount the struggle that brought us to this historic vote last night in the United States Senate. Let me preface my remarks by telling you about the worst vote I ever cast as a member of Congress. You don't hear many senators stand up and say, let me tell you about my worst vote. Well, I can tell you it was in the House of Representatives. It was 1986. And because we were scared to death of crack cocaine, which was now showing up all over America, we created a 100-to-1 disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine sentencing. The net result of that we thought would be to scare America straight in terms of the danger of this drug, and it backfired. It turned out we had more drugs on the street. We had a lower price for the drugs that were out there because of the burgeoning supply, and we started filling up our jails with people who were arrested for drug offenses, a 700% increase in our jail population because of this new level of our war on drugs. I voted for it. A lot of Democrats did. We were scared, frightened. A fellow named Len Bias, who was a University of Maryland basketball player destined for the NBA, died of an overdose about the same period of time, and we thought, we can't waste any time. We've got to do this. We did it. It didn't work. And so 10 years ago, I set out to try and change it, to bring it to 1-to-1 from 100-to-1. The Fair Sentencing Act brought it down to 18-to-1. But we still had existing in the law this mandatory minimum sentencing. And some of the perfidy of the sentencing guidelines that created just incredibly impossible to explain situations where people were put away for years, if not for their lives. And so I enlisted an unlikely ally, Mike Lee, judged by the New York Times as then the most conservative member of the Senate. I'll never be in that category, you can bet. But the two of us came together, put in a bill, looked pretty good, except we had one serious problem. We didn't have the support of Chuck Grassley. And Chuck Grassley was going to be Senate Judiciary Committee chairman. So we knew we needed Chuck on our side if we were going anywhere. Now, let me tell you about Dick Durbin and Chuck Grassley. And I got to be careful what I say. If it's too good, he'll use it in his campaign brochures. But I came to the Senate Judiciary Committee, and I was put on the Administrative Law Committee or Administration of Justice Subcommittee as the ranking Democrat with Chuck Grassley as my chairman. And I thought to myself, so let me get this straight. I have an Iowa corn farmer as the chairman of this Judiciary Subcommittee, and I'm a big shot Illinois lawyer. No contest, right? Well, pretty soon I realized after he picked my pocket and cleaned my clock and then left me in the dust of his John Deere tractor to take this man, Chuck Grassley, very seriously when it came to issues in the Judiciary Committee. So Mike Lee and I set out to enlist him as our partner in this effort, and after a year of gentle persuasion, he came around. We put our team together and started moving forward. We were stopped on the floor of the Senate by Mitch McConnell, either because of memories of Willie Horton or the fact that his caucus was split over the issue. He just wouldn't touch it, and we were stuck. Then came a breakthrough I never expect, the election of Donald Trump as president. What does that have to do with this? He brought his son-in-law to town, and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, has a passion for prison reform because of a family experience, and he wasted no time getting involved and engaged in the effort. We worked with him throughout this whole endeavor. The net result of it last night is nothing short of an historic vote that really changes our outlook on our system of justice for the first time in decades, and it's a dramatic change. I think it reflects the fact that we realize that just getting muscular and tough on the war on drugs isn't enough. We've got to use our brains in terms of interdicting those who would supply drugs to our country, trying to convince those who would become addicts not to do it, and working in an honest, good faith way with addicts to turn their lives around. In addition to that, those who are in prison because of this, many of them languish for decades in prison, decades, for a drug offense that doesn't involve violence or firearms. These are people who deserve a second chance if they're willing to work for it. We put those two concepts together, a brand new approach to dealing with narcotics in this country and a new approach when it came to dealing with prisoners in our country. It is a breakthrough. The fact that we had 87 votes, and if he'd have been here, 88 votes, Lindsey Graham would have made 88 votes last night, is something worth noting. We're confident that the House is going to take this up next, and I believe that when they do, we have a good chance of passage. I want to thank Cory Booker on the Democratic side for being by my side throughout this whole battle, and Tim Scott, thank you for joining us on the Republican side. You're a valuable ally in this effort. We're not finished. It's entitled The First Step. What's the second step? The second step is to learn from this experience and to find a way to reduce incarceration while still reducing the crime rate in America. States are proving to us this can happen. Now it's time for us at the federal level to do just the same.
I remember Len Bias. I remember watching him play at the University of Maryland. remember thinking at the time, this is someone we'll see playing basketball for many years. He had a promising career ahead of him in the NBA. And I remember when his life was taken short, tragically, how disappointed I was. I thought about all the basketball games I wouldn't get to see him play in for many years to come. Congress reacted to that and other incidents, and it did so understandably. But over the course of time, we realized that Congress was taking people's lives away in a different way, sometimes warehousing human beings for decades at a time, taking them away from their families, their faith communities, their neighborhoods, their places of employment and opportunities for growth and experience and development. Little by little, we've seen that as the U.S. Bureau of Prisons has come to consume what is now approaching 1/3 of all of the Department of Justice revenue, all of the funds going to that department that we rely on to make the American people safe. That is not only coming at a great economic cost and diverting those costs away from other things that could help make the American people safer. There's a much greater cost, the human cost, that comes as people's sons, fathers, brothers, uncles, nephews are taken away, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades at a time. I've told the story many times of when I was a prosecutor, a federal prosecutor. I became aware of a young man in Utah named Weldon Angelos who was sentenced for selling 3 dime bags of marijuana to what turned out to be a confidential informant. Mr. Angelos, in his mid-20s, and the father of 2 young children at the time, had a gun on his person and didn't realize he was selling to a confidential informant. He was charged in federal district court, and he received sentence enhancements based on the fact that he was selling pot while carrying a firearm, even though he didn't brandish it or discharge it in connection with the offense. Mr. Angelos received an enhancement under 18 U.S.C. Section 924C for 5 years for that first conviction. For the second conviction, count 2 of a single indictment, he received another enhancement for 25 years to run consecutively to the first 5-year enhancement. For the third count of the same indictment, he received another 25-year enhancement under 924C, making for a minimum mandatory sentence of 55 years in prison. The federal district judge who sentenced him, himself a former federal prosecutor, not a softie on crime, Paul Cassell, took the unusual, almost unheard of step of issuing an opinion disagreeing with the sentence he was about to impose. There are rapists, he said. There are murderers. There are hijackers. There are terrorists who don't get this much time. And yet I, as a federal district judge, have no choice but to send this man away for 55 years. This, he said, is wrong. And he said, there's nothing I can do about it. Only Congress can fix this problem. Those words have haunted me ever since then, especially since I was elected to the United States Senate in 2010 and arrived here in 2011. After being assigned to the Judiciary Committee, I decided I needed to do something about that. Only Congress can fix this problem. I started looking for allies, and I found one in Dick Durbin. And we knew that it would be an uphill climb. We knew that it would be difficult. We knew that we'd encounter a lot of resistance, including and especially within my own party. Over time, we were joined by a few others who took interest in this. Lindsey Graham came on board, and I remember when Tim Scott came to the Senate in early 2013, he told me he was a fan. I remember the exact moment I met Cory Booker. I felt like I had known him for years. I had worked in Newark for a year. He was a legend there. I imagined this Sphinx-like character who had the answers to all of life's difficult questions, and he does. I felt like I knew him, but this was the first time I had met him. He introduced himself to me and said, as if he needed any introduction, "I'm Cory Booker from New Jersey, and I'd like to work with you on criminal justice reform." I will never forget the many hours that Senator Durbin and I got to spend in Senator Durbin's office with Chairman Grassley, getting into the granular details of this legislation, of the need for criminal justice reform. Terms like safety valve, 924C, 851, all became common usage in our little group. This was a discussion that probably would have bored most Americans and most lawmakers to tears, but we got into the nitty-gritty details. And although it was a difficult negotiation session, what we came out with in the end was a good bill. And in many ways, it was made better by the fact that each of you, gentlemen, for working with me, and each of your staffs, the many groups from across the political spectrum. I'm grateful to President Trump for his open, honest, aggressive advocacy for this, to Jared Kushner, and to all those who have helped us with this effort. Senator Booker.
Thank you. I just want to start with my a deep sense of gratitude as well. First to Chuck Grassley. This, as has been said before, would not have happened if it wasn't for the willingness of Chuck Grassley to listen, to learn, and to work with us. He is the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and he's the person that in my opinion, that made this possible, took it from being impossible to being possible. And I'm deeply grateful to you, sir. Thank you for your lead. I forced him to hug me last night, sir. I promise you I won't make you suffer that too much more.
Not a Midwestern.
Not a Midwestern. I also want to thank Mike Lee, as he said, in the first hours that I was a United States Senator. I came to the United States Senate. One of the driving purposes of my life was to make a difference in criminal justice reform. And I still remember on a subway car, as to when I didn't even know my way around the Capitol, I saw him and I knew about his bill with Senator Durbin and just asked to work with him. And from that time all the way till last night, he has been an honorable, decent, in every way a person of integrity. When he gives you his word, he follows through on it. And as Dick Durbin said to me on the floor last night, that he is like, in those last hours, he was the fullback on that goal line stand, pushing this thing through and really navigating. I want to thank Lindsey Graham because, I've had some of my funniest moments where he's assured me that this would get done. Took a little bit longer than he assured me. But the moment I want to just thank him for, I'm not sure if he remembers this, but he and I were on the phone with Jared Kushner on the White House, and I was trying to force into this one last provision. And this was right after the Kavanaugh hearings, and Lindsey Graham was literally putting his foot down, standing up for me and the provision and fighting to get it into that bill. It would not be in the bill if it wasn't for Lindsey. He's been a friend, and I want to thank him for that. I want to thank Tim Scott, who has been ever present through criminal justice reform efforts and has been my partner on a lot of really meaningful things that are going to help people. And then finally, my thank yous, not only to the activists, not only to the outside groups, but I just really want to take a special moment to tell you what Dick Durbin means to me. And it's he is a remarkable human being. I've got to see him in a lot of very personal moments where no cameras are around, and watch how he stands up for the most vulnerable in this country. Whether it's dreamers or people in prison that most people have forgotten about, he has been a tireless champion. And when I got to the United States Senate, I'll never forget his willingness to embrace me and allow me to be his sidekick of sorts through this whole time, elevating me, giving me opportunities a junior freshman senator probably shouldn't have. He is my champion, and he is, but for him, we would not be celebrating this day. And I just want to thank him for the opportunities he's given me to have perhaps one of my most meaningful experiences as a United States Senator. Thank you. I want to just give one example of why this bill is important, and then say one more thing and give up the microphone. But there's a provision in this bill that Dick Durbin already described called the Fair Sentencing Act, making it retroactive. This is a colossal injustice, but it is an exhibit to the many injustices that this bill works to address. But I just want to drill down on it for a moment, because the absurdity of someone on the 2nd of October, 2010, getting one sentence that's 100 to 1, and then literally someone sentenced the next day got a sentence dramatically less. That's the America we live in until this bill becomes a law. I mean, it is stunning that this kind of injustice goes on in our country, that there are people who've watched folks go in and out of prison for doing the same thing or worse than they did. It's outrageous. But the reason why I pull this out to drill down on is just to make the point. Our criminal justice system feeds upon the most vulnerable in this country, the poor, the mentally ill, the addicted, and disproportionately black and brown people. And so when you correct an injustice in general, and this bill addresses people from all backgrounds, all races, but when you correct an injustice in a biased system, it dramatically helps those marginalized people. That provision alone, 96% of the people that are helped by that are black and Latino. This was something that was done that had a racial impact that is unacceptable. And that provision that Dick and others fought to get in this bill is going to help over 2,000 Americans have pathways to liberation that deserve it. And so I want to finish saying thank you to everybody, but the title of this bill is very, very important to me. It is called The First Step in a very long journey. We should celebrate. We should give gratitude to everyone, including, as Dick said, the White House. And we know this wouldn't even be a shot of this if it wasn't for the White House. But I want to let you know we still live in a country where these outrageous injustices are still going on. And the great thing, and I've had these conversations with Lindsay from the beginning, this is not a partisan issue. Republicans and Democrats both agree that you should not go to prison based upon how much money you have. There are people in prison right now that are there not because of guilt or innocence, but because they're poor and they wouldn't be there if they had the resources to get. That's wrong in this country. That we should not have in our nation the largest mental health care facilities in this country be our prisons and jails where people's mental illnesses are compounded and aggravated, and then they are left back on the streets worse off than before and perhaps even more dangerous. That we shouldn't have a system that grinds in people with addictions, and this is another thing this bill works to address, but then doesn't treat those addictions. There are still lots of injustices that we need to address. This is a first step in a long journey, and the bipartisan commitment, including the White House, who said to me they're committed to continuing the work. Let's celebrate, but the work must continue. I now want to bring forward my dear friend who has an equally great haircut, Tim Scott.
Good morning to everyone, and certainly I am as appreciative as the other colleagues about the significant progress we've made through this first step. I want to thank each and every one, but specifically the farmer who became the Judiciary Chairman for your hard work and your dedication on this issue. And certainly both Dick Durbin and Mike Lee, as well as Lindsay and Corey, have spent a lot of time on this issue. I've spent 4 or 5 years on this issue, so I'm the newbie at the table. But I come to this issue from a very different perspective. My thought first on criminal justice reform, and I thank the president, because without President Donald Trump, this would not be happening. There's no question about that. The only way to get the Republicans to the table to start the conversation was because of the successful and effective approach that President Trump took. So that is without question. But I started the conversation because I wanted to make sure that the communities that the returned citizen is going to be a safer place. So for me, this is not simply a criminal justice reform bill. This is a community justice reform bill. As a kid growing up in a single-parent household mired in poverty, I recall the day that I came home from school when my house was broken into. And so from my perspective, what I hope to accomplish with this legislation is to curb the number of folks who go home and commit a crime and come back to jail. That makes our communities safer. If today the number is 76% of the time, within a 5-year period of time, the person who gets out comes back to jail, that means that they've gone home and committed a crime. If we can do what South Carolina has done, which is to take the number from 76% significantly lower, which has led to 7 state prisons being closed, and community safety going up, it has occurred because we have discovered the secret recipe of reducing recidivism, which falls into 3 basic tranches. One is around workforce development, having the skills necessary to be employable when you go home. Number 2 is recognizing and dealing with the emotional and mental issues and conditions that are pervasive throughout our criminal justice system. And the final piece is the importance of education. I've spent some time visiting state prisons in South Carolina, and the level of functional illiteracy in jail must be around 60 to 70%. If we can focus on the benefits and the advantages for the community, this bill will have been worth it. Next, we'll hear from the senior senator from South Kakalaki, Lindsey Graham.
Let them know where you were.
All right. Oh, don't you worry. Well, let's get a little deep, so I'm going to lighten it up a little bit. Corey and Dick are great, but they're wrong about most things. but not this. So I just got back from Afghanistan. The Senate is slow except when I need it to slow down a little bit. I'm sorry I couldn't get back for the vote, but we may have a breakthrough in Afghanistan. Only God knows about reconciliation. If they're watching what's possible, all of us saying great things about each other from different parties, maybe we'll take on in Afghanistan. But, yeah, I would have been 88 gladly. The bottom line, the cause is just, and that means you got a 50-50 chance of getting anything done. So Jared Kushner was mentioned a couple of times. Without Jared's tenacity and his team putting together a coalition I've never seen from conservative liberal, this would not have happened. So I hope he is enjoying the moment because he certainly earned it. Getting President Trump on board was the game changer. He came out openly for it, and it broke the dam in the Senate. As to Mike and Dick, you've got to be very pleased. You started this journey a very long time ago, and it is an unusual political coalition. It had a lot of power to it, and you're not going to get anything through the Judiciary Committee without the chairman. And Senator Grassley, I think, listened intently, and his leadership made it possible in committee, and we got a good vote. But Mitch is the majority leader. He's got to make decisions about competing interest. And I want to thank him for making this happen. When the president came out for it, it gave him cover. Mitch was sort of on the fence as to whether or not to support the bill, and he came our way. So I'm just really pleased. And Corey's biggest contribution is to make sure that the perfect is not the enemy of the good. There were a lot of people on the left who wanted to take this down because you could get a better deal next year. You would not have gotten a better deal next year. This wouldn't have happened. And I think he helped Dick mightily to keep the coalition together because we had to do some giving to get the president and others on board. And to the critics of the bill, you say that somebody under this bill will get out and do something bad. That's probably true. But what I hope you'll realize that most people who get out under this bill a bit early are going to contribute mightily. We're going to lower the cost of our prison system. We're going to give people earned second chances. To those who say you should never let them out, that ain't working. Every category, you're qualified for good time. If you just behave yourself in jail, no matter the offense, you can get out early. In most cases, just to keep the jail from blowing up. All we did is to create another way to get out early if you're a nonviolent offender and you're low risk. You have to invest in a skill set to stay out. So to the critics who are waiting for an example of somebody getting out who does something bad, what's your answer to the recidivism rate that Tim described? Nothing. Here's the biggest effect of this bill. People are going to get out of jail and they're far less likely to go back because they can get out earlier if they work hard and invest in the skill set to stay out. It only affects 10% of the American prison population at the federal level. I hope states are watching, I hope governors are watching, and use this as a model. Finally, as to what Mike said, I'm a pretty hard ass on most criminal justice things. But we have a system that's just gotten to be bureaucratic. There's no reason for the gentleman described by Mike to go to jail for 55 years. Now, that doesn't make anybody in America safer. So we're giving judges a chance to avoid what the judge was so painfully asked to do, give a sentence not consistent with the crime in front of him. That's all we're doing. And nonviolent offenses at the federal level, we're going to give judges a chance not to put somebody in jail for 50 or 60 years that doesn't need to go. We're going to make sure that if you do get out of jail under this bill, you have a better chance of not going back. And that's a huge accomplishment for the country. And I hope this moment here, where we all feel good about each other, that maybe that's a sign that 2019 might be okay. Thank you.
All right. We've bothered you for a half hour. I hope there aren't very many questions. We'll take a few. Go ahead. By the way, the reason I said we'd take a few is because we do have a vote at 11:30. Go ahead.
So you guys talked about a lot of the high points of getting to this point. When did you think that it was over, that you would knock it here? What was the low point?
When we, I think we thought it was over. Quite to, I think, a lot of our surprises that it was put on the agenda by the leader. That was the key point, I believe. Next question.
So you thought that the leader, had you hoped that the leader would have been more supportive early on? Did you not think that he would actually do this?
I think you've heard my colleagues. He's got a terribly big job, and I think he wants to avoid as much breaking up of the caucus as he can. And I don't know for a fact, but I think as we got well over 30 people that said they'd vote for the bill, then that's more than half of the caucus. I think that probably impacted him. I think the president's tweets and phone calls that the president made a difference. But any of those, maybe there was some other factor I don't know about. But what I know about, it'd have to be some of those things.
Senator, Senator Gardner's marijuana amendment wasn't allowed to be voted on. Tens of thousands of people are in prison for nonviolent marijuana-related offenses. Any plan to work on that next, especially you, Mr. Booker?
Well, I think
what are your thoughts on that, Mr. President?
We won't have time to work on it as me, chairman of the committee, and I don't even know whether Lindsey Graham wants to address that. But I don't have...
Let me just say this. If I'm chairman, and I'm asking for your votes, and thanks for the nice letter, it is first step. Let's look at everything. I'm going to look at fentanyl. I've got a completely different view of fentanyl. I want to make it so hard to deal in fentanyl you won't want to do it because you're literally killing people just with a little bit of a drop. That's different than marijuana. So let's look at everything, and the committee will be in business to look at everything and make some good common sense decisions.
And I plan on sending some brownies to his office to celebrate his new chairmanship should he be elected.
Need them right now.
And as they answer questions, just to have a little bit background on this bill, it only affects federal prisoners who make up less than 10% of the country's prison population. It changes life sentences in an attempt to focus the harshest sentence on the most violent offenders. The bill lowers the mandatory minimum sentences for prior drug felonies. Drug offenders will, with 3 convictions or 3 strikes, could face 25 years in prison instead of life.
I think that you could look at the bill.
There is more discretion for judges with this bill. Federal judges would be given more leeway for their discretion when sentencing certain drug offenders. Rehabilitation efforts is another change. It will allow some 2,600 people serving sentences for crack cocaine offenses before August 2010 the opportunity to petition a judge for a reduced penalty. And also, prisoners could get 7 days of credit for good behavior each year of his or her sentence with this bill. It reaffirms existing rules and also seeking to reaffirm enforcement of those according to the Marshall Project. For example, the bill expressly prohibits the use of restraints on women who are pregnant, in labor, or in postpartum recovery. This has been prohibited since 2008. Additionally, it would require officials to place imprisoned offenders no more than 500 driving miles away from their home or family.
There were 1,000 times when we had to rescue it from the fire. That's what makes it so gratifying. Thank you.
Over to some other news. The list is out for Forbes 2018 richest celebrities. Tracy Carrasco spoke with Good Day Philadelphia from the Fox Business Network studio.
I say this every day. This is an indication we're near the end of the world. Forbes
Why is that?
Well, here's an example. Forbes magazine just named this year's richest, wealthiest celebrities, and a lot of familiar faces. So, Tracy, we don't have time for all the top 10 or top 20. Let's do top 5. How about that?
Alrighty, let's start from the bottom. We have Jay-Z and Kylie Jenner tied for 5th place with $900 million. Kylie Jenner, of course, only 21 years old, made famous by her Kylie Cosmetics. Really, that's, I think, what made her a lot of money within the last few years. Michael Jordan coming in at number 4 with $1.7 billion. Of course, his sneakers and his 90% stake in the Charlotte Hornets basketball team. That's where a lot of his money has come from.
Okay. And just the Jordan brand in
number 3,
general.
Yeah.
Yep. And number 3, Oprah Winfrey with $2.8 billion. She's Oprah. What more do you need to say?
That's it.
She's got her investment with Weight Watchers. That's been doing well. Steven Spielberg, number 2, with $3.7 billion. And number 1, George Lucas, $5.4 billion.
Well, Star Wars took him to the top, no question about it.
Well, yeah, selling Lucasfilms to Disney in 2012, that was, I think, $4.1 billion. That's a huge help right there.
Well, let me tell you this, Tracy. Wasn't it Kylie who was at the King of Prussia Mall yesterday?
No, it's Kendall. Her
Oh,
sister.
that's Kendall. That's her sister Kendall is dating one of our basketball players, Ben Simmons, here in Philadelphia. So she's pretty wealthy too as a model.
I think she made.
I don't know if she's on the list though.
I think she made like $22 million or somewhere around there from her modeling gigs this past year. I think I saw that headline recently.
So that's confirmation that we cannot be much longer for the world. The 5th person on the list is Kylie Jenner.
And she's 21.
She's entrepreneurial, you know? You love saying that word.
Yep.
Entrepreneurial. And it all goes back to Ray J. Wow.
Oh, so you're trying to say if that didn't happen, that she wouldn't have created her own makeup line? Or
Am I right?
who's to say, you know, maybe she would have thought of it still.
And from some more Good Day Philadelphia, there's a new e-cig warning out there, and it has to do with teens. Dr. Jen Caudle spoke with Mike and Alex on Good Day. Here's a look at that.
Well, we knew this was coming, but what an announcement yesterday by our Surgeon General.
The Surgeon General issued a special advisory warning on the popular e-cigarettes, and we've been doing segments about this. This is big because officials are calling them a growing threat to health of American teens.
So the Surgeon General, Dr. Jerome Adams, who's from New Jersey, says the advisory follows a new study that shows e-cigarettes has more than doubled among 12th graders, was that seniors in high school, and expected to grow. But listen to this, an estimated 3.6 million teens are now using these e-cigarettes. That's 1 in 5 high schoolers. Here we go. 1 in 20 middle schoolers are vaping. The advisory singles out one company in general, Juul Labs, which he says markets to young people purposely.
I'm officially declaring e-cigarette use among youth an epidemic in the United States. They're not safe, they're not cool, and they can cause long-term problems in terms of learning, attention, memory, and priming the brain towards addiction.
He's trained as an anesthesiologist, by the way. In a statement, Juul, that company, Juul Labs, says their intent was never to make youth using the products and have taken action to solve that marketing problem.
Because they put colorful things on it and make it look like things that kids would want to do, and that was part of the problem.
Well, Dr. Jen Caudle is here talking about, first of all, just remind us, what are they sucking into their mouths?
Right. So vaping is really what the term is for the use of e-cigarettes. They come in lots of different shapes and sizes. So parents, by the way, some of them look like little USB devices. They can look like pens or, you know, tobacco-like things. children and adults through e-cigarettes are smoking nicotine, flavorings, and other chemicals.
It's it's flavored
Flavored nicotine vapor with other chemicals.
A lot of them are fruity in taste.
Yeah, many of them are, and that's where we think that the marketing towards young kids has come. Yeah.
And it's also because kids are still growing, and it affects them when they're trying to grow and mentally. And
so let me tell you, I as a family doctor, I have been adamant for years about the dangers of e-cigarettes. I've written op-eds in CNN about this. I've talked about it a lot. The problem with e-cigarettes, especially in young people especially, is that they contain nicotine, which is a tobacco product.
Yeah.
The problem with that is we don't know how nicotine affects the developing brain. Remember, these are kids. They're still growing. Their brains are developing. And we know that children who use e-cigarettes and get started on nicotine so early are at a higher risk for actually transitioning to regular cigarettes and other tobacco products.
And that's the weird thing, because it was marketed with some companies. This is a way
to quit smoking.
Smoking.
And so let me tell you what I say about that, because I do these segments on e-cigarettes all the time, and people will write me and they'll say, well, Dr. Jen, I use e-cigarettes and it's helped me quit smoking. They're not all bad. Now, this is what I say. First of all, are e-cigarettes technically safer than regular cigarettes? Yes. But are they safe? Not necessarily.
No. Safer.
They're safer. Now, the thing about it is they're not intended for use in kids at all. But in adults, what I say is, look, if you've been able to use e-cigarettes and quit smoking regular cigarettes, then brava, that's exactly what we want. But a lot of people end up using e-cigarettes and regular cigarettes, and that's not what we want. And remember, again, when we talk about kids, no e-cigarettes at all.
So, can you go into these places? Do you have to show ID to buy a
That's a good question.
vape?
Now, the FDA has recently started vamping up regulations for e-cigarettes because there are some places that have not been so strict with showing ID and things like that. They want to change the age for which you can buy them. So, and I have to give it to these e-cigarette company makers that they are working with the FDA to try to enhance regulations, and that is what we need.
But the problem is the parents have to step in too, because even if they don't sell them to kids know how to get around it. You get a friend who's a little older or older brother and try to get them to get it for you.
And you guys mentioned in the introduction, we said, what is it, 1 in 5 high school students, 1 in 20 middle school students? That's like 6th graders. It's like 7th graders. Parents, think about this. 1 in 20 middle schoolers are vaping. So you got to talk to your kids about this. You've got to be on the lookout.
Rooms.
Yeah, check the rooms. And remember, a lot of the, and again, I mentioned this before, USB chargers. I'm not trying to call folks out. I'm just trying to say that these e-cigarettes come in many different forms, and you may not even know that that's what this is.
They were especially using those in schools.
Teacher,
this is
this
from
is
my
a USB,
computer.
right?
What are you talking
And
about?
getting by that way. And also the flavoring is not so good. So.
All right.
We need education. Parents, talk to your kids.
Doctor, have a great holiday.
Thank
we don't
you.
see you.
You
Merry
too.
Christmas and
You
all
too.
that.
Thank you.
And last but not least, a Philadelphia teen is taking on the heat, but all for a good cause. He was with Good Day this morning to explain what he's doing to make sure those who need it have it covered.
Let's eat. No, it's mine.
Oh,
that's you. Go.
That's mine. Okay. We recently told you about a young man from University City who's giving back to others this holiday season while running a successful business. So, his name is Lev, and he's the owner of Hot Sauce for Heat, a company that donates a portion of its proceeds to help people pay for their heating bills. Yes, this 13-year-old started out making his hot sauce in his kitchen and selling it on street corners, but now he's selling it online, and he hopes to eventually have it sold in restaurants and stores.
Lev Burstein is right here in studio with us.
Hello, Lev.
Hello.
From West Philly, born and raised, huh?
Yeah.
Still living in University City? What's your school?
The Philadelphia school.
So you're around 13 years old?
So when did you first get into this hot sauce business?
Last year was 7th grade. I read this article about kids around my age, and they were selling and making stickers, and I was like, I want to do something like this. So I wrote out a bunch of ideas, and then the final idea was Hot Sauce for Heat, and we give a portion of the proceeds to people who can't afford heat in the winter, and
that's when here you are.
Yeah.
Now, so you are a hot sauce aficionado? Like, are you always eating stuff?
Yeah, I love hot sauce. It's
well, you probably like it more than Alex and I. So, we've brought out some chicken nuggets here. We're going to taste this.
Yeah.
What is you have 3 different examples here, types that we can buy. What's the first one?
This is a manufactured table hot sauce. It's mild. It's not super spicy, but
That one there.
it has a kick.
That's all me right there.
Bigger kick here.
This is a little bigger kick.
So it's like medium?
It's homemade. It's not manufactured.
Okay.
And that one is super spicy.
But you made all of these though, or just
these two are homemade. This one we manufacture.
Okay. What's the key? Can you tell us just a secret of the recipe?
Habanero peppers.
Oh, that's right behind us.
So
here.
were you just in your kitchen at home, like putting all kinds of peppers and trying different things out?
Just blend it up until it tasted right.
All right, let's give it a shot. I'm going to take a nugget. I'm going to try the mildest.
I was going to try the mild one.
Well,
Here
I think we both can do that.
I probably put too much on there.
Bob, do you like spicy?
Yeah, a little bit.
Come on in here. Whoa! The mild is spicy to me. I'm so white.
Yeah, it's not that spicy. It's on the cusp.
Yeah, it's the mild.
But not yet. You can't even handle a mild.
Well, there's no lemon. There's a little vial thing.
Oh, you went straight to that?
No, I haven't done it yet.
Okay. Okay, the mild, it's good. It does burn a little bit.
Yeah, after 4 bites, it kicks in.
Oh, my goodness. The middle one. Woohoo! It's really tasty, though.
Here we go.
It is really good.
I'm not double dipping, guys. I just ripped it in half. Just saying.
I'll dip on the other side.
Oh, God, I already have a cold now. I'm really running.
Ooh, it'll clear your sinuses right up, Mike.
It's really good, though.
Yeah.
The flavor is fantastic.
Thank you.
Sweet, yeah.
All right, Bob, let's go for this one on the end. Alice, can you do the little one? This is the hottest of the hot.
Am I ready?
That is a little different
My mouth
taste.
is already burning.
I mean, it's not out of control, so don't be afraid to get this. Why, how much money you want to raise?
This winter, I want to donate $5,000.
Okay, so we have a GoFundMe. How do I get? Can I buy it?
Well, you can buy it on our Etsy page. Just look up Hot Sauce for Heat, and you can also get it on our GoFundMe page, which you can also look up.
You're up over 6,000 already.
Yeah.
That's great. That's wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Come on, viewers. Let's get that to 10,000 before 10 o'clock this morning.
Let's help others. And let's also, don't we have some of that milk left over?
Yeah, please.
Milk and Pepsi.
Congratulations.
Thank you very
It's
much.
wonderful.
You're going to be a great...
13, right?
Yeah.
13 years old. He has his own business, helping others.
He'll be an entrepreneur for sure.
Well, thank you for watching News Now, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, for all the latest and breaking news, and tune into our broadcasts at 5, 6, 10, and 11. Happy shopping, everyone.